declare our meeting open. So firstly, I have an apology from Councillor Wendy Doody. No other apologies here, so you need to move that, Neville. Seconded by Al. I'll put that. All those in favour, aye. Contrary, carried. Any conflicts of interest? Okay, we come to confirmation of minutes. Item 3.1. Someone prepared to move the minutes? Moved Councillor Barnett, seconded Councillor Williams. I'll put the recommend. Do you wish to speak? No. Okay. Anyone else? I'll put that. All those in favour, aye. Contrary, carried. Any matters arising? Right. So I've just got a late agenda item, and that's the delegations for management and regulation. If you've all updated your diligence settings, as I said before, it's in there, so we'll deal with that or I'm proposing we deal with that as item 5.3. So I just need to move that we accept the late agenda item. So I'll move from the chair, second to Councillor Blackie. It's procedural. I'll put that. All those in favour, aye. Contrary, carried. Okay, so now we come to 4.1. Joanne.
Good afternoon. This report is providing a summary and seeking endorsement for the strategic approach of the combined foundations and rest of network business case, which has been prepared by the Greater Christchurch Partnership. This is a culmination of several months of work on public transport in the Greater Christchurch space, and it aligns with previous briefings which have been provided by Barry Main. The recommended package of work for Waimakariri includes increased expenditure in bus shelter infrastructure and also allows for some budget operational cost, which includes TDM over the next 2 years. I would just note in the recommendations that the business case proposes an annual increase in investment from $51,000 to $255,000 per annum. At this stage in our draft long-term plan, we have allowed for $105,000 per annum. However, this matter would be considered further as part of the long-term plan process. Other than that, I'll take the report as read, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Joanne. Any questions? Councillor Barnett?
Just looking at the big report that's back on page 77 of our agenda, sorry Joanne, it just talks about bus stop enhancements, and it talks about a connection stop, a key stop and a minor stop. But the inference is that every single stop has a bus shelter. What are we aiming at as part of Greater Christchurch?
Yep, that's a really good question, and I think the aim is definitely to provide an increased level of service that actually does encourage people to take the bus. And certainly on wet and cold days, there's not a lot of encouragement for people to stand out in the rain and take the bus if they have nowhere to stand. Over time, I think we would aim for there, but it would take time to get there. I think what the package of investment has potentially allowed for that over the 10-year period, but the suggested expenditure at the moment wouldn't get us to a bus stop in every location over the
So
the 10
how
years.
many sort of are you aiming at, ballpark?
Well, if we looked at that, it was saying we've got half the expenditure, we would be able to probably do around half of our stops over 10 years. But so that would be something for council to consider. It does also, I think, depend on the number of people who are accessing via each stop. So we would need to assess that on a case-by-case basis in terms of how big the shelters would need to be.
Okay, further questions? Councillor Williams?
Yeah. Will we have the full control of how this money's spent, or will it be dictated, some of it, by other parties to the council?
The funding will have 51% funding through NZTA via ECAN because it is part of public transport. We would need a process that prioritised where our bus stops go, and I think a good starting point for that would be around the patronage, the number of people getting on and off at each stop. So I think we would use that as our starting point for how we make decisions around which stops get prioritised first.
Further questions? We have a recommendation. Someone prepared to move? Well, I'll move it. Oh, sorry, you can move it, Councillor Barnett. Yep. Seconded, Councillor Bryan. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, it's obvious looking at the report that this is something that we need to commit to. The amount of money we've been spending to try and encourage people to use public transport is not going to cut the mustard in a growing district. So this is a sensible investment, not too fast, not too slow, trying to improve the level of service to make it easy to travel by bus, and it is in line with what our partners are doing. So I thoroughly endorse putting this in the plan.
Further speakers? Well, just briefly, just to say that we're the last of the partners to receive this report, and I know it's just before Christmas, but it's really important that we do endorse this report today, because it is, when it goes through to the next phase, it would be great that all the partnership are in agreement with this general position. And we've already had, Barry was here not that long ago and has briefed the council. Yes, there is an additional budget item, but as Joanne's mentioned, that's something we will consider, have further opportunity to consider as part of the long-term plan. But I think all the work's been done on this, and they've done a really good job, so I personally support it and I'd like to see the council endorse that today. Further speakers? I'll put do you wish to exercise your right to reply, Councillor Barnett? Okay, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Thanks, Joanne. We now come to 5.1 Adderley Terrace. So that's Raymond and sorry, Rob. Pardon me, just had a moment there. Sorry, Rob. Don't easily forget you. All right. All right. Thanks, guys. Raymond, thank you.
So we received the application from Lime Development to stop part of Adderley Terrace Road. There are two legal framework we could use to stop the road. One's Local Government Act, the other one's Public Works Act. But in this case, because after we stop the road, we're going to sell it to the adjoining owner, it is better to use the Local Government Act.
Yep. Yep. I think this, by way of background, this obviously is one of the last stages of completing the connector road, so it's a logical progression of things that have been in front of council for some years, and is closing out on that part of it.
Thank you.
And we'll take the report as having been read.
Yes.
Well, it was recommendations from the transport. So.
Yeah, it was part of utilities and rating last week. So for some of us, will be still familiar with the Councillor Williams' question.
Yeah, can you just inform us how we get the valuations of that? Do we get the value for what we sell that road portion is the same as what we pay for existing properties, or how's the formula worked out on what we get per square metre?
Certainly, it's, in the earlier sales, there was to Lime, there was a calculation that effectively covered all of our costs associated with the purchase of the other properties, the board property and the like. In this instance, the roads wasn't subject to that, so we would likely get a valuation assessment of what the general land values were, and that would take into account the capacity of that to be utilised for the current zoning or the proposed zoning. So yes, so it will be on a valuation basis.
Councillor Blakey?
Item D, Rob, on the recommendations. On what grounds can people object to this, and what's the procedure if anybody does?
Raymond, could you use your microphone, please? Thank you.
So basically, people who living surround the road stopping area can object it, and they have to have a valid reason. It's not like there's just a random people say, I don't agree with the road stopping, and we have to consider it. It's not like that. We have to assess it internally, and if we uphold the objection, then it has to go through the environment court.
Okay, so any further questions? Councillor Atkinson?
Just when it's stopped, there's a piece of road there that's going to remain there, obviously for the private residents that are there. That'll go to the community board about the naming of that, what that should be.
I don't think we've contemplated that question.
It's been raised by a neighbour there.
Yeah.
And I had heard that they were looking at changing the name, rightly or wrongly, and it is at the end of Island Road, so that you can put all those things together if you like. My question is, can we have it at the end of that as Island Road, if that's possible? Can we look into that before that's done?
Yep.
Oh, Joanne might be able to clarify. Do you want to come to the table, Joanne? Thank you. If you could just use the mic for Adrian's benefit and the audio stream or recording.
I was just going to say Scott Morrow is all over that in terms of the naming, and he will be bringing a report back to council.
Thank you. Any further questions? For the recommendation, someone prepared to move? Councillor Williams, seconded. Councillor Redmond. Councillor Williams, do you wish to speak? Councillor Redmond.
No, the only comment I'd make is I think stopping under the Local Government Act is preferable, because then affected parties do have the ability to object, and it's a transparent process. So I'm in favour of the recommendation.
Thank you. Any further speakers? I'll put nothing to respond to. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. Thanks, Rob and Raymond. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right, 5.2. So, Mark and Don, you're up. Thank you. Could you just use your mic there? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Good afternoon, everybody. This report is asking for a recommendation for the approval of the construction of the cycleway in Bikariri and Paraki Street. I'll take the report as being read, but I'll just give a quick summary of the work that we've done in the last couple of months, just for people that potentially aren't aware of what's happened in the project. In August, we had a public meeting with a large number of residents, approximately 70 to 80 residents, that had some concerns about our proposed cycleway. It became apparent from that meeting that there was a lot of confusion around what potentially we were wanting to do in the street, and people's misunderstanding of the cycleway in general. So at the board's recommendation, staff went back to re-engage with residents, and this engagement was done via a letter, and to ask residents if they would want to be interested in participating in a working group. And the working group would consist of 3 sessions, working with residents and key stakeholders like the school and fire service and cycling advocates to look at the design. That work was done through the month of October and November, and while we were working through the working group process and listening to residents' concerns and educating them on the design also, we also sent a flyer and a survey out to all residents in Vickery and Paraki Street to update them on the process, the design, and give the residents the opportunity to talk to us again because they felt that they hadn't been heard, their voice hadn't been heard. We collated that work from the survey. We additionally did a public church meeting with residents to socialise our refined designs and also listen to their concerns. All that work ultimately was brought back into refining our design, where we tried to remove as many of the issues from residents' concerns from our design as possible and come up with a design that we felt was not only safe but also mitigated a lot of the concerns around lost parking and residents' issues around intersections. So the work really then was refined down to a point where we had a reasonable amount of consensus from the working group. Not everyone in the working group agreed with our design ultimately, and we got to a point where we felt that we had addressed and engaged as much as possible with that work. Ultimately, I guess from this report, we're looking at either two options. One is to go ahead with the design, and the other, I suppose, is to abandon Paraki Street and potentially look elsewhere. The concerns around if we don't go ahead with the design will be that we would not be meeting potentially our obligations with wider Christchurch and the Christchurch Northern Corridor. We wouldn't have a link through Kaiapoi. The link would basically stop at the edge of Kaiapoi and also the Passchendaele Path, so riders would be left to navigate their own way through the town. So we feel that that the design would benefit not only Kaiapoi but the wider community of Waimakariri as well. I guess if we weren't to go ahead with the project, some residents would feel that they have been listened to and their concerns have been addressed. But I think the survey results from the survey that we did with the wider residents shows that there is a very low turnout of residents that were against the project after the refined designs, as opposed to the initial August consultation. So we think that we've got considerably more approval from the residential survey and responses from the people. I guess that in summary is the work that's happened in the last 2 months. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thanks, Mark. Did you wish to add anything, Don? Thank you. Questions? Councillor Barnett.
Just one quick question. All the modifications and additional things that residents have asked for, are they going to cost more?
No, actually, interestingly enough, so one of probably the major concerns from residents were the speed humps. So the speed humps were single width humps, and we were trying to, I guess, beautify the street by putting in some landscaped areas with plantings and trees. Now, the feedback from residents was that the lost parking for them and single lane humps were something that they weren't really interested in. So probably almost halving the price of those speed humps is by removing the planters, making an asphalt hump. You can park over those humps, although I wouldn't kind of suggest that you should. It is done. So we basically have kind of almost removed those issues around the parking, and there's been a cost saving there as well across 6 speed humps.
Thank you. Any further questions? I've got a recommendation. I'll move it. Seconded, Councillor Blackie. I think it's been a very interesting exercise, to say the least, and I think the attachments speak volume for the work that's been done on this particular project to meet with both the residents and there was certainly at the public meetings and others, and I've had a number contact me concerned about the process that the council has followed there. But I think the work that's been done, particularly, and it's not to draw any conclusions about the past because I know that work was being done, but in the latter part, the work that's been done there has really worked really hard to try and bring the community on side and to I guess address the concerns that have been raised. And I would really like to commend you, Mark and Don, Karen and team who've been involved for that work, because I think, and Sandra is the independent chair, I have a few good feedback there around that process that's been followed in the committee that's obviously been supporting that. I think it's a really important link to link in with the other work that's been a significant investment from NZTA. Obviously they are a major part in this investment too, but the thing that really interested me when we went to the open day of the Northern Corridor was just how many people were out there on their bikes and using this area, and the excitement that is generally around the community around the cycling. I think it's going to be very popular, and there does need to be a safe path. I acknowledge that not everyone is universally happy, but I think on balance what swayed me is the work that's gone on to address the residents' concern and to try and come up with a solution that's a win-win, really. But acknowledge not everyone is going to be entirely happy. But when I looked at the numbers, they were roughly 50-50. It's a big difference from the 90-odd% that were opposed before. So just, Mark, I'd like to say thank you for particularly your work in leading this. I understand you're retiring from, or moving on from the council.
I wish I was retiring, but yeah.
Not retiring, but you're, you know, we'd just like to say thank you for your service and all the work that you've put into this. Cycleways do tend to engender bits of comments, and I have talked to other councils around and how they're dealing with these things, and so we have had some discussions around the perhaps ways that we can undertake consultation and what are the learnings from other councils and from our own processes and how we bring people more on board. And I think what we've ended up with now is a really good blueprint for consultation, so thank you for that. This is a recommendation that's come through from our community board, so it's been through that exercise, and on that basis plus the work that's been done, I'm prepared to support it. Councillor Blackie. Who are the speakers? Councillor Barnett. Oh, sorry, Barnett. Councillor Stewart. Who else put their hand up? Councillor Redmond. Thank you.
Just very quickly, often proposals like this engender a lot of fear, and so it is very, very important to acknowledge that fear and to bring people along with you, and you've done a spectacular job of doing that by the look of all the information we've seen in the report. I think what residents may find is it's not as bad as it turns out, and it's often the fear of the unknown as to what happens. I've had friends live in Paraki Street, and the boy racer problem has been nasty through there, so I actually think that some of these measures will actually make life nicer for them, but it is really important to acknowledge that on-street parking is really, really important for residents, that they do want people to visit and so on, so we've got to keep that balance in mind. So I think you've done a very, very good job with all the group that's been involved to get this over the line. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I certainly congratulate both yourself, Mark, and Don on your dedication and determination to get the recommendation that we're going to approve today. I'm particularly interested in having a report, and I guess there's a question there. Are we going to have a report on what went well, what didn't go well, and how we approach issues like this in the future? Because we're going to have plenty of them, and you know, while this is has turned out successfully, you know, the fact that I can't even add up how many Roman numerals there are in attachments here, but that's not what we want to see in the future. How many?
23.
Well, so is there going to be a report? Because I mean, it's all very well to say, look, we've learnt that this perhaps isn't the way to do it. We've ended up where we would like to have gotten, potentially at a cheaper price. But we need to have a template on how we should do it in the future. So is there a written report coming? And Mark's knowledge before you leave would be really welcome, because I think that we need a new template for addressing issues like this. We're going to have plenty of them, and I would agree with the sentiment expressed that there are going to be plenty of people coming across that cycleway from Christchurch. On Saturday morning when I went through, I thought how many are on it? And there were 3 coming just early morning, and I thought, well, here we are, people are already using it. So we're going to have other issues come up, other proposals. So are we going to have a look at our template for consultation on these and how we can do it much better than we've ended up having to do it here?
So just briefly, Mr Mayor, I've booked in a session. I certainly picked up on Councillor Stewart's similar comments at the Kaipoi Community Board. We've booked in a session tomorrow before Mark does go, where we are going to have a debrief at a staff level as to what went well, what didn't go so well, and what we can do in the future. And we will be bringing that back firstly to the Kaipoi Community Board and then on from there.
Thank you. Councillor Redmond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think there have been learnings in this exercise. Initially, I opposed the cycleway down Paraki Street based on the level of opposition from residents, and I say residents because I would put residents' rights first, really. I think they have a vested interest in their property, in their street. They were concerned with loss of parking, loss of amenity, and other factors. I sort of kept in the background but kept in touch during this extended process, which I'm pleased to say went very well, and I've received very complimentary reports about Mark and Don and the team. So I think it is important that we're transparent when we are trying to persuade perhaps people to a certain point of view. I thought I'd just read a sentence from Bruce Hogarth, who was one of the original organisers of the public meeting, initial public meeting, and he agreed that a better outcome will have been achieved with the help of the little residential activism, as he refers to it. I hope that the council outcome provides a safe, accident-free Paraki Street. And he said somewhere here, where did he say it? In order to effect an abandonment of the cycleway down Paraki Street, substantial support was needed from most of the residents, and this was lacking in the final survey. So whilst not everyone will be happy, I think there has been significant progress in getting a number of residents over the line, and on that basis I'm happy to support the proposal. And it is something to bear in mind when we do consult on cycleways. It's not just cyclists we need to consult with, really. It's to look at it from the residents' point of view as well. And I look forward to the outcome of your debrief. And once again, thank you very much. As I said at the Community Board, perhaps unofficially, this Paraki Street cycleway may be known as the Mark Barnes cycleway, but that's unofficially.
The Barnes Way.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further speakers? There's nothing really to respond to other than just to acknowledge the comments that have been made already around stuff. I think the debrief, as I mentioned in my comments, I think will be really important, actually, those learnings that we have picked up. I don't think our process was totally flawed, but it certainly was. It started during a pre-COVID period, and then there was all that period of time in between. So there are, and there will always be, no matter how hard we try, people that feel that they haven't got communication in those. But it's really useful to learn from that and how we can pick those items up for future consultations, because cycleways will engender conversation no matter where they go. But I do think that they're a good thing in our district for people to be safe in their cycling, and I know that a lot of people are looking forward, as we've mentioned, to use it coming from Rangiora through Kaipoi and later. I do hope that we do get a link from Woodend at a particular point in time through to Kaipoi, because I do think that people will use it more often. I'm intending to have a go during the Christmas period myself on my bike from Rangiora, which will be good for me. But I think that's the sort of level of excitement that we do and interest that we do have in our district going forward, and I think likewise from the city side, we're going to have a lot more locals from Canterbury coming through, which is really great. But thanks again, Mark, for all your work, to Don, Karen, all the team that have been involved. It's really appreciated. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. There we are, the Barnes way. all the best with your future, Mark. Thank you. Cheers. Cheers. I was right to reply. I moved it. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I asked if there were any further speak. I'm happy to let you speak if you wish. That's all right. I asked for further speakers. Sorry.
The only thing I had to say about it was this.
Yeah. Thanks, team. All right. Oh well. Not all. All right. So we now come to 5.3, which is the additional agenda item. So I'll just give you a minute to pull that in from your agenda. So that's the delegations for the manager of regulation. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, did you want to offer something soon? Yeah, that's right. Just remember that other chairs quite often forget to even afford the right opportunity to speak. Just saying. just remember that. That's all I have to say. All right, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your indulgence receiving this late report. Given that there's a regulatory separation that occurs in the council between the chief executive and the head of regulation, in this case manager of regulation, it's appropriate to ensure that through the transition between Nick's retirement and Tracy Tierney's commencement in February, that should the need arise, we've got somebody who has the delegation in place, and that doesn't trip us up in any action that we might want to take. And we hope that there are none to be taken, but in the case that there are, this report suggests that well, seeing Matt's in the room, Matt Bacon is, yep, you'll do, Matt. Matt as manager, planning implementation unit manager, would be appropriate to hold that delegation for that period. So just seeking your indulgence to endorse that, please.
Thank you. Any questions? Moved, Councillor Atkinson, seconded. Sorry, Councillor Barnett, do you wish to speak?
I'm just very pleased that the CE wrote that in as he was sitting there, just the name. Just seen you were here, Matt. No, look, it'll be great to have Matt there, just looking after things while things tick over for the next month or two. So we definitely need it, and I hope everyone will support it.
It's just good to see that this hasn't caused the chief executive some headaches, and over this period of time it's very, very important that we have a delegation here, and it's nice to just have that tidied up before Christmas. So thank you.
Councillor Mealings?
In addition to the aforementioned comments, I'd just like to say, Matt, I think you're the perfect person for the job, and I'm glad you're here to hold the reins for us. Well done.
Any further speakers? Councillor Blackie? No. Just checking. All right. Right of reply, Councillor Atkinson. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, declare that carried. So with that, our next meeting's to be held on the 2nd of February at 1 p.m. We have another meeting at 3. So declare, thanks Matt, happy Christmas. Declare our meeting closed. Thanks Adrian.